Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the god of destruction. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun was dying over Muzurifu. It bled a bruised purple and burnt orange across the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the concrete rooftop. The wind up here was colder than it was on the streets below, carrying the metallic scent of exhaust fumes and the distant, rhythmic thrum of a city that never truly stopped moving. For Izuku Midoriya, however, the world had ground to a violent, silent halt. He stood near the railing, his knuckles white as he gripped the rusted metal. The notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future No. 13, lay scorched and battered on the ground behind him, a testament to a day that had started with optimistic delusion and ended with a shattering reality. No, the word hung in the air, heavier than gravity. It wasn't the mockery of Katsuki Bakugo, nor the pitying whispers of his classmates. It was the solemn, clinical judgment of the symbol of peace. All Might, the man whose smile had been the sun in Izuku's solar system. Without a quirk? No, young man. I cannot in good conscience tell you that you can become a hero. The job is too dangerous. If you want to help people, there is always the police force. They get teased, but it's a fine profession. The door to the roof stairwell had clicked shut minutes ago, but the sound echoed endlessly in Izuku's mind. He looked down at his hands. They were scarred from years of frantic note-taking, calloused from anxious wringing, and trembling. They were empty. That was the crux of it, wasn't it? In a world where 80% of the population held fire, ice, telekinesis, or transformation in their palms, Izuku held nothing. He was a vessel without contents. A glitch. A null set. I knew it, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. The sound was swallowed by the wind. I always knew. He leaned over the railing. The drop was substantial. Down there, cars looked like toys. People were ants. Somewhere in that city, a sludge villain was likely rampaging, and somewhere, heroes were rising to stop it. But up here, there was only the boy who didn't matter. Katsuki's advice from earlier that day resurfaced, toxic and seductive. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building and hope for a quirk in your next life. Next life, Izuku muttered. Tears finally spilled, hot and stinging tracks cutting through the grime on his freckled cheeks. What makes you think I'd want another round of this? He wasn't going to jump. He didn't have the courage for that, or perhaps, he had too much respect for the inconvenience it would cause the janitorial staff. But he stayed there, staring into the abyss, letting the darkness of the coming twilight seep into his pores. He felt a profound sense of hollowness opening up inside his chest. It wasn't just sadness, it was a vacuum. A perfect, absolute void where a dream used to live. The world around him began to mute. The traffic noise faded. The wind stopped howling. The color drained from the sky, turning the vibrant sunset into a static gray. Izuku blinked, wiping his eyes. What? The air pressure dropped so sharply his ears popped. The birds that had been circling the water tower froze in midair, suspended like bad animation. The clouds ceased their drift. Time hadn't just stopped. It felt like reality itself was holding its breath in terror. A pillar of light, silent and absolute, descended from the gray sky. It didn't crash. It simply arrived, connecting the heavens to the concrete of the roof a few meters behind Izuku. He turned, his back pressing against the safety rail, eyes wide. From the light stepped a figure. He was tall, elegantly slender, with pale blue skin and white hair coiffed in an upward sweep that defied gravity. He wore maroon robes with black and gold geometric patterns, and around his neck floated a large, blue ring. In his hand he held a long staff topped with a black orb that seemed to contain a swirling galaxy. The stranger tapped his staff against the concrete. Clack! The sound was deafening in the silence. Oh dear, the stranger said. His voice was melodic, polite, and terrifyingly calm. I seem to be a few milliseconds early. Or perhaps, just in time. Izuku tried to speak, but his vocal cords were paralyzed. His instincts, usually dormant, were screaming at him to grovel, to run, to cease existing. This was not a pro-hero. This was not a villain with a warping quirk. This was something else. The being glided. He didn't walk, across the roof, stopping a few feet from Izuku. He leaned in, examining the boy with violet eyes that looked ancient. "You are vibrating with despair," the being noted, sounding like a sommelier tasting a rare vintage. "And yet, underneath the sorrow, nothing. Absolutely nothing." Izuku managed to unstick his tongue. "Who are you?" "I am Whis," the being replied with a pleasant smile. "I am an attendant. A teacher. A minder on occasion. I have traveled a very long way, crossing the membrane of your multiverse, to find something very specific." Whis straightened up, tapping his chin with a finger. "You see, in the cosmos, balance is paramount. Creation and destruction. Two sides of the same coin. For eons, your universe, Universe 724, locally designated, has been unbalanced. You have many heroes. Many villains. A chaotic struggle of wills. But you lack a true arbiter." "I don't understand," Izuku stammered. "If you're looking for a hero, All Might just left. He went that way." Whis chuckled, a sound like wind chimes. "All Might? The blonde man with the internal injury?" No. He is a candle struggling against the wind. I am looking for a void to fill. I am looking for a god." He pointed his staff at Izuku's chest. "You, Izuku Midoriya, are quirkless." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Yes," Izuku whispered, shame coloring his cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm useless." "Useless?" Whis tilted his head. "On the contrary. You are pristine. Do you know why mortals in this world struggle to harness the divine energy of destruction? Because their cups are already full. They are full of these quirks. Biological mutations. Genetic clutter. To pour the power of a destroyer into a vessel like All Might or this endeavor would be like pouring molten iron into a plastic cup. They would shatter." Whis took a step closer. The pressure radiating from him forced Izuku to his knees. "But you," Whis continued, his eyes glowing softly. "You are empty. You have been hollowed out by fate. You have been told you are nothing, and you have believed it so thoroughly that you have become a perfect vacuum. And nature, young Midoriya, abhors a vacuum." The angel extended a hand. "I offer you a choice. You can stay here, on this roof, and live a life of mediocrity, watching others shape the world while you wither in regret. Or you can come with me. You can leave this planet, leave this dimension, and learn the nature of true power. Not to save a cat from a tree, or to stop a bank robbery, but to safeguard the existence of the universe itself." Izuku looked at the pale blue hand. "You want to give me a quirk?" "I want to make you a god of destruction," Whis corrected gently. "It will hurt. It will take time, centuries, from your perspective, though I can return you here mere months from now. You will be broken, rebuilt, and stripped of your mortal fears. But when you return, you will never be looked down upon again." Izuku looked past Whis, at the spot where All Might had stood. "You cannot be a hero." Maybe All Might was right. Izuku couldn't be a hero. A hero was a public servant, a rescue worker, an inspirer of peace. But the universe didn't just need peace. It needed order. It needed consequence. Izuku reached out. His hand was shaking, but his grip was firm. "Take me," Izuku said. Whis smiled. "Splendid." He tapped his staff on the ground twice. "Hold on to your lunch." A column of violet light erupted around them, incinerating the air. In a blink, the rooftop was empty. The notebook hero analysis No. 13 remained, its pages fluttering in the wind, unnoticed, as the timeline of Earth marched on without Izuku Midoriya, the realm of the destroyer. There was no sky here. There was only a swirling nebula of amethyst and gold, a cosmic kaleidoscope that stretched into infinity. The planet itself was strange, an inverted pyramid of rock and lush, alien vegetation floating in a pocket dimension. The gravity was crushing. When they arrived, Izuku vomited immediately. He collapsed onto the emerald grass, his body feeling like it weighed 10 tons. Every breath was a labor. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Breathe through your diaphragm," Whis advised, standing over him, completely unaffected. "The gravity on this world is roughly 30 times that of Earth. If you panic, your lungs will collapse." Izuku gasped, forcing air into his chest. He clawed at the grass. Why so heavy? To strip away the weakness, Whis said, walking toward a large, gnarled tree that resembled a bonsai the size of a skyscraper. Welcome to your home for the foreseeable future. There is no internet. There is no Katsudon. There is only training. The first year was hell. Izuku didn't learn a single technique. He didn't fire a single beam of energy. For the first year, or what felt like a year, time was fluid here. He simply learned to move. He dragged boulders across the floating plains. He ran laps around the base of the great tree while wearing suits that increased the gravity further. He did push-ups until his pectoral muscles tore, and Whis healed him with a tap of the staff, only to order him to do 1,000 more. It was brutal. It was monotonous. And it was exactly what Izuku needed. On Earth, his mind had been a storm of anxiety, overthinking, muttering, worrying about what people thought. Here, under the crushing weight, he didn't have the energy to overthink. He could only survive. The silence of the void began to seep into him, replacing the anxiety with a cold, hard resolve. By the end of the second year, Izuku could sprint across the plains. His body had changed. The baby fat was gone, replaced by lean, whipcord muscle that looked carved from marble. He had grown taller, his posture straightening as his spine adapted to the pressure. Then came the key. Power is not something you grab, Whis explained one morning as they sat by a lake of crystal-clear water. Mortals think power is a shout, a punch, an explosion. That is crude. That is leaking energy. Whis held out a finger. A small, purple orb manifested. It didn't buzz or hum. It was perfectly silent, yet the space around it distorted, light bending away from it in fear. Divine energy, Hawkeye, is absolute. It is the authority to say no to existence. To wield it, you must stop leaking. You must contain everything. Your doubt. Your fear. Your desire. Izuku tried. For months he failed. He would try to summon energy, and it would explode outward, scorching the grass. He was thinking like a human, trying to push the power out. You are still thinking like a hero, Whis chided, deflecting a rogue blast with a yawn. Hero's project. They want to be seen. You must be internal. You are a black hole, Midoriya. Pull it in. The breakthrough happened during a meditation session atop the highest peak of the inverted pyramid. Izuku sat cross-legged, the wind howling around him. He thought of Bakugo. He thought of the bullying. He thought of All Might on the roof. Usually, these memories brought pain. Tears. But today, he felt tired of the pain. He felt tired of the heat of that anger. Let it go, he told himself. Don't burn with it. Just delete it. He visualized the memory of Bakugo mocking him. He didn't fight it. He simply visualized a hand closing over the memory and crushing it into dust. Snap! A sudden stillness fell over the mountain. Izuku opened his eyes. He wasn't glowing with the yellow electricity of a shonen protagonist. He was shrouded in a deep, violet aura that clung to his skin like a second layer of liquid. The rocks floating around him weren't just floating. They were slowly disintegrating, turning into sand, then into atoms, then into nothingness. Whis floated up, clapping politely. And there we are. The first step of the god of destruction, the century of erosion. Time lost its meaning. Izuku stopped counting the days. He stopped missing his mother, though Whis assured him she was fine, frozen in a temporal stasis bubble he had placed over the Midoriya apartment to prevent panic. A lie, perhaps, but a kind one. He learned martial arts that predated the human race. He learned to fight without thinking, his body moving on instinct, a rudiment of ultra instinct, though he was far from mastering it. He learned to fly, not by pushing against the air, but by willing gravity to ignore him. But the hardest lesson was the philosophy. One day, Whis took him to a dying star system within the localized dimension. A planet, barren and gray, orbited a sputtering red sun. Destroy it, Whis said. Izuku floated in the vacuum of space, shielded by his ki. He looked at the planet. It was dead, but it was still a planet. Why? Because it is stagnant, Whis said coldly. It serves no purpose. It harbors no life. It blocks the path of new celestial bodies. Creation cannot happen without space. You are the gardener, Izuku. You must prune the dead branches so the tree can grow. But what if I'm wrong? A god does not doubt, Whis replied sharply. Doubt leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to incomplete destruction. And incomplete destruction is torture. If you are to destroy, you must do it with absolute conviction. Or you must not do it at all. Izuku raised his hand. He concentrated the violet energy into the palm of his hand. Hawkeye. He hesitated. The human part of him, the part that wanted to save everyone, flinched. The energy dissipated. Whis sighed. Disappointing. He tapped his staff. A holographic projection appeared in space. It showed a battlefield. Heroes fighting villains. Collateral damage. Civilians dying because a hero hesitated to put down a villain who was clearly irredeemable. Your society on Earth, Whis narrated. They preserve the rot in the name of morality. They lock monsters in cages, and when the monsters escape, they kill more innocents. Is that mercy, Izuku? Or is that cowardice? Izuku watched the projection. He saw Shigaraki, though he didn't know the name yet, decaying a crowd. He saw the fear. To save the many, was whispered in his ear, you must be willing to remove the one. You are not a murderer. You are a force of nature. Does the typhoon apologize? Does the earthquake feel guilt? No, they simply are. Izuku looked back at the dead planet. He closed his eyes. He stopped being Izuku Midoriya, the fanboy. He imagined he was the void. He raised 2 fingers. Hawkeye. A tiny purple spark shot from his fingertips. It hit the planet's surface. There was no explosion. No fiery boom. The planet simply bleached. It turned white, then translucent, and then it dissolved into dust, which then dissolved into light, which then vanished. Where a planet had been, there was now only empty space. Izuku lowered his hand. He felt a terrible chill, but also a strange, calm clarity. Good, Whis said. Now do it again. Faster. The transformation. As the centuries passed, perhaps 300 years in this hyperbolic time chamber, though only 10 months on Earth, Izuku changed physically. The stress of channeling divine ki altered his DNA. His green hair, once an unruly mop of curls, grew slightly longer, the tips turning a permanent, shimmering violet. His eyes, once wide and fearful, sharpened. His irises shifted from emerald green to a piercing, glowing purple. He no longer walked with a hunch. He glided. He spoke less. He didn't mutter. When he looked at something, he didn't analyze it for weaknesses. He analyzed its structural integrity, and its worthiness to exist. He wore the clothes of a destroyer, loose, baggy trousers, golden sash, and the distinctive metal collar of office. You are ready, was said one day. Izuku was meditating, floating upside down on one finger. He flipped upright and landed softly. Ready for what? To return, Whis said. The entrance exam for UA High School begins in 1 hour, Earth time. Izuku blinked. The name UA felt like a memory from a different life. A childhood dream he had outgrown. Do I really need to go back? Izuku asked, his voice deep and smooth. The affairs of mortals are tedious. And their heroes are playing dress-up. That is exactly why you must go, Whis smiled. You are the god of destruction for this sector. You must judge your subjects. You must decide if this hero society is worth preserving, or if it requires a hard reset. Besides, Whis's eyes twinkled. You promise yourself you'd be a hero. Why not be the strongest one? Izuku looked at his hands. He could erase a solar system with a thought. And yet, the image of All Might telling him no still burned somewhere deep in his gut. Not as a wound, but as a challenge. Fine, Izuku said. But I'm not wearing the spandex. Earth, the UA entrance exam. The crowd outside the massive gates of UA High was buzzing with nervous energy. Hundreds of teenagers were stretching, comparing quirks, and shivering in the February chill. Among them stood Katsuki Bakugo. He looked confident, explosive, and arrogant. But internally, he was annoyed. He hadn't seen Deku in 10 months. The nerd had vanished. Run away, probably. Good riddance, Bakugo thought. Without a quirk, he'd just die in the exams anyway. Suddenly, the chatter stopped. The clouds above the school parted in a perfect circle. A beam of violet light, silent and majestic, struck the pavement right in front of the main gate. The students gasped and scrambled back. The pro-heroes monitoring the entrance, Present Mike and Ectoplasm, jumped to alert. Whoa! Is that a student? That's some entrance! Present Mike shouted, though his hand hovered over the alarm button. The light faded. Standing in the center of a small, smoking crater, which was perfectly circular and smooth as glass, was a young man. He wore the standard middle school uniform, but it fit him differently. It was crisp pressed. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His hair, dark green fading to purple, defied the wind, but it was his eyes that froze everyone in place. They were glowing. Is that? Someone whispered. Bakugo's eyes widened. He recognized the freckles. But everything else was wrong. The posture. The aura. The sheer pressure radiating off him made the air taste like battery acid. Deku? Bakugo choked out. Izuku turned his head slowly. He looked at Bakugo. There was no flinch. No fear. Only a mild, bored recognition. Katsuki, Izuku acknowledged. His voice carried across the silent crowd without him raising it. Where the hell have you been? Bakugo yelled, sparks popping in his palms. And what the hell is with that light? Did you hide a Quirk this whole time? Izuku ignored the question. He turned to the gates of UA. He looked up at the towering glass structure. So this is the cradle of heroes, Izuku murmured. Small. Hey! Don't ignore me! Bakugo lunged forward, grabbing Izuku's shoulder. In a fraction of a second, too fast for anyone to track, Bakugo was on the ground. Izuku hadn't punched him. He had simply shifted his shoulder and released a micropulse of pressure. Bakugo lay flat on the pavement, wheezing, pinned by an invisible weight that felt like a mountain. Izuku looked down at him. Do not touch the divine without permission, Katsuki. It is bad for your health. The gates opened. Present Mic's voice boomed, slightly shaky. All right, listeners. The exam starts. Now. There are no countdowns in real battles. Run! The students hesitated, glancing at the terrifying boy in the crater, then surged forward in a panic, eager to get away from him. Izuku stepped over the gasping Bakugo. Shall we begin? He whispered to himself. The practical exam, Battle Center B. The city replica was chaotic. Robots were rampaging. Students were shouting, blasting fire and lasers. Izuku walked down the main street. He didn't run. He strolled, hands in his pockets. A three-pointer, a massive missile-firing robot, turned the corner. It locked onto him. Target acquired. It charged, metal treads grinding the concrete. Move, kid! A contestant with engine legs yelled, sprinting past. You're gonna get crushed. Izuku didn't flinch. He watched the robot speeding toward him. Crude craftsmanship, Izuku critiqued. Inefficient energy consumption. The robot raised a metal fist to smash him. Izuku lifted his right hand, pointing his index finger at the machine. Begone. A flash of purple light the size of a marble shot from his fingertip. It touched the robot's chest plating. There was no sound of metal crunching. The robot didn't explode. It simply erased. The metal turned to dust instantly, the dust turned to atoms, and the atoms scattered into the wind. Within a second, the three-pointer was gone. Not broken. Gone. Izuku kept walking. Another robot appeared. A two-pointer. Izuku didn't even lift his hand this time. He glanced at it. He flared his ki, just a fraction of a %. The air pressure around the robot increased to crushing levels. The machine crumpled inward like a crushed soda can, sparking and dying. Score 5 points. In the observation room, the teachers were glued to the screens. What is that? Midnight asked, leaning forward, her eyes wide. Is it telekinesis? Disintegration? No, Nisa said, his paws trembling slightly over the control console. The sensors, they aren't picking up a Quirk factor. They're picking up radiation? No, something denser. It's like a walking black hole. All Might sat in the back, in his skeletal form. He stared at the screen. He recognized the boy. The boy from the roof. Young Midoriya. But he was Quirkless, All Might whispered. On the screen, Izuku was surrounded by 5 robots. He yawned. He spun in a circle, a ring of violet fire extending from his leg. The robots were bisected cleanly, their top halves sliding off their bottom halves. The cut surfaces were glowing hot. Score, 45 points. He's not fighting, Aizawa noted, his eyes narrowed. He's cleaning. Then, the ground shook. The zero-pointer, the massive gimmick robot, towering higher than the buildings, rose from the depths of the city. It cast a shadow over the panicked examinees. Run! Everyone screamed. Izuku stood still. He looked up at the behemoth. Nearby, a girl, Ochako Uraraka, was trapped under rubble. She struggled, terrified, as the giant treads approached. Izuku floated. He lifted off the ground, defying gravity, rising until he was faceplate to face with the zero-pointer. The students below stopped running to watch. A boy floating in the sky, facing a titan. You are disrupting the balance, Izuku said to the robot. He raised his hand, palm open. A sphere of destruction energy, dark purple and crackling with black lightning, formed in his hand. It was the size of a baseball, but the energy reading spiked so high the cameras in the observation room cracked. Hawkeye. He didn't throw it. He crushed the sphere in his hand. A shockwave of pure, purple erasure exploded outward. It washed over the zero-pointer. The giant robot didn't stand a chance. The head, the torso, the arms, they didn't break. They dissolved. It looked like ink being washed away by water. In seconds, the massive threat was reduced to a rain of metallic sand that coated the city block. Silence. Absolute silence. Izuku floated down, landing softly next to the trapped Uraraka. With a wave of his hand, the rubble covering her disintegrated into dust, freeing her. He looked at her. She was staring at him with terror and awe. Are you damaged? Izuku asked casually. No. She squeaked. Good. Izuku brushed some dust off his shoulder. This test was incredibly boring. The aftermath. Izuku walked out of the exam gate. The other students parted like the Red Sea, afraid to even breathe near him. Waiting by the gate was Whis, leaning against a lamp post, checking a holographic watch. How was it? Whis asked. Did you hold back? I used 0.01%, Izuku sighed, adjusting his collar. And I still think I overdid it. The big robot was flimsy. Excellent restraint, Whis beamed. I have prepared a bento box. Earth food is truly the only reason this planet is worth saving. I agree, Izuku said. Let's get Katsudon. As they walked away, Izuku glanced back at UA High. He saw All Might watching from a window in the high tower. Izuku's purple eyes locked onto the hero's blue ones. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply nodded, an acknowledgement from one god to a mortal. I am here, the look said. And I am the judge, the jury of the watchers. The conference room at UA High School was usually a place of lively debate, where coffee flowed freely and the egos of pro-heroes clashed over curriculum and budget. Today, however, the air was stagnant, heavy with a silence that felt almost pressurized. On the main screen, frozen in high-definition clarity, was the image of Izuku Midoriya floating face-to-face with the zero-pointer. Nizu, the Chimera principal, sat with his paws steeped together, his black eyes unblinking. Rewind the audio again, please. Enhance the subsonic frequencies. Power loader tapped a key. Hawkeye. The voice on the recording wasn't loud. It was a whisper that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in the bone marrow. And then, the visual. The colossal robot dissolving into metallic mist. It defies the laws of physics, Power loader muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grease-stained rag. I've analyzed the debris, or what's left of it. It's not heat damage. It's not molecular disintegration in the traditional sense, like Shigaraki's decay. It's complete existential erasure. The atoms simply stopped being atoms. He calls it Hawkeye, Midnight murmured, shivering slightly despite the warmth of the room. She wrapped her arms around herself. The way he looked at that machine, it wasn't the look of a hero facing a threat. It was a janitor looking at a stain. Aizawa Shota, slumped in his sleeping bag in the corner, stared at the screen with bloodshot eyes. He didn't save the girl because he cared. Did you see his vitals? His heart rate didn't spike. His adrenaline didn't surge. He saved Uraraka because her death would have been messy or inefficient. That's not a hero. That's a machine. He is not a machine. The booming voice came from the back of the room. Tashinori Yagi, All Might, sat in his skeletal form, looking smaller than usual. His hands were clenched on his knees. I know this boy, All Might said, his voice trembling with a mix of guilt and confusion. I met him 10 months ago. He was a normal, quirkless boy. He was fragile. He wanted to save people more than anything. People change, All Might, Vlad King grunted, crossing his massive arms. Puberty. Trigger drugs. Late blooming quirks. Though if this is a quirk, it's in a category of its own. We're talking Omega-level threat assessment. Nisa tapped the table, drawing their attention. The sensors register no quirk factor activation. When he destroyed the robots, his biological quirk genes remain dormant, because he doesn't have any. Instead, our sensors picked up an unknown energy signature. It shares similarities with nuclear radiation but lacks the fallout. It feels ancient. Nisa turned to All Might. You rejected him, didn't you, Tashinori? You told him he couldn't be a hero. All Might flinched. I told him the reality of the job. I wanted to keep him safe. Well, Aizawa drawled, standing up and unzipping his sleeping bag. It seems he found a way to be unsafe on a galactic scale. We have to admit him. Are you insane, Aizawa? Sniper asked. The kid is a walking nuke. Exactly, Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Do you want a walking nuke attending a normal high school? Or wandering the streets unsupervised? Or worse, being recruited by the League of Villains? We admit him. We watch him. And if he steps out of line? Aizawa's scarf floated ominously. I'll shut him down. Nisa smiled, a sharp, toothy expression. Agreed. Send the letter. Let us welcome Mr. Midoriya to the hero course. I have a feeling this year will be educational. The domesticity of a deity. The Midoriya apartment was exactly as Izuku remembered it, yet it felt like a dollhouse. The walls seemed too thin, the ceiling too low. He felt that if he stretched too hard, he might accidentally punch a hole through to the neighbor's living room. He sat at the kotatsu, staring at a bowl of katsudon. Across from him sat Whis. The angel was struggling, elegantly, with a pair of chopsticks, trying to pick up a slippery slice of pickled radish. Oh, the cuisine of Earth! Whis exclaimed, finally catching the radish and popping it into his mouth. He cupped his cheek in delight. Truly, the complexity of flavor profiles here is astounding. The balance of savory and sweet. If you destroy this planet, Izuku, I shall be very cross. We'd have to import the chefs to the Destroyer realm, and they simply wouldn't survive the gravity. Izuku took a bite of the pork cutlet. It tasted like nostalgia. It tasted like a time when his biggest worry was a math test. I have no intention of destroying Earth yet, Whis. It's tolerable. Izuku, baby! Inko Midoriya bustled into the room, carrying a tray of tea. She looked exactly the same as the day he left, thanks to Whis's temporal manipulation. To her, Izuku had been away at a special overseas intensive training camp for 10 months. She hadn't noticed the centuries of trauma in his eyes, or maybe she refused to see it. I'm so proud of you! Inko gushed, placing the tea down and hugging Izuku's head, pressing his face into her apron. My baby, applying to UA. And this nice foreign exchange coach, Mr. Whis, was it, says, you have such potential. Izuku stiffened slightly, then forced his muscles to relax. He gently patted his mother's arm. Yes, Mom. Whis has been very instructional. Oh, stop it, Whis giggled. He's a natural talent, Mrs. Midoriya. A prodigy of strength. There was a knock at the door, or rather, the mail slot clattered. Inko rushed to get it. She returned holding a heavy, wax-sealed envelope with the UA crest. It's here! Izuku, it's here! She shoved it into his hands. Izuku looked at the envelope. He could feel the electronic device inside. He could sense the battery, the circuits, the recorded data. Go on, open it in your room. Inko encouraged. Izuku sighed. He stood up, gliding slightly above the tatami mats, catching himself before he floated too high. Right. I'll be back. He walked to his room, a shrine to All Might. Posters, figures, bedsheets. He stood in the center of the room, looking at the smiling face of the man who had crushed his dreams. It felt like looking at photos of an ex-girlfriend. A mix of fondness and pity. He tore the envelope. A metal disc fell out. A hologram projected onto the wall. "I am here!" All Might's voice boomed. Izuku sat on his bed, face impassive. "Young Midoriya," the hologram continued. "You made quite the splash at the exam. 0 combat points? No! Because this is a hero course. We look at the whole picture." The screen shifted to a leaderboard. "Rescue points, infinity. A judge's prerogative. You faced the impossible with, well, overwhelming force. You saved young Uraraka. You passed with flying colors. Come, young Midoriya, this is your Hero Academia." The hologram faded. Izuku stared at the blank wall. "Hero Academia," he whispered, testing the words. They tasted unfamiliar. Whis leaned against the doorframe, holding a teacup. "A bit theatrical, isn't it?" "It's loud," Izuku noted. "But it gives me a position from which to judge. If the heroes of this world are all show and no substance, I will know soon enough." "And if they are?" Whis asked, eyes narrowing playfully. "Then I will do what I was trained to do," Izuku said, his eyes flashing purple. "I will clean up the mess." April, the first day. The UA hallway was massive. The door to Class 1A was roughly 20 feet tall, designed to accommodate students with gigantification quirks. But to Izuku, it just seemed like overcompensation. He stood before the door. He was wearing the UA uniform, gray blazer, dark green trousers, red tie. But unlike the other students, he wore no backpack. He carried nothing. He slid the door open. The noise hit him instantly. "Remove your foot from the desk." Tenya Ida was shouting, chopping the air with his hand. "It is disrespectful to the upperclassmen who crafted it." "Ha!" Katsuki Bakugo had his feet propped up, a scowl etched permanently onto his face. "Shut up, Four Eyes. What junior high are you from? A finishing school?" Izuku stepped in. The room didn't go silent immediately, but a wave of heaviness rolled from the doorway. It was instinctual. The students nearest the door, Momo Yayorozu and Shoto Todoroki, stopped talking and looked up, feeling a sudden drop in air pressure. Bakugo froze. He slowly turned his head. Izuku walked to an empty desk behind Bakugo. He moved with a fluidity that was unnatural, his feet barely making a sound on the linoleum. "Deku," Bakugo growled, the name coming out like a curse. "Katsuki," Izuku replied, sitting down. He didn't look at Bakugo. He looked forward at the chalkboard. "Don't ignore me." Bakugo slammed his hand on his desk, creating a small explosion. "You think you can just show up with that, whatever that was at the exam, and act like you own the place?" Izuku turned his head slowly. His purple eyes bored into Bakugo's red ones. "I do not own this place. But if you continue to shout, I might decide to remove the noise." Bakugo's jaw tightened. He wanted to scream. He wanted to blast this nerd to kingdom come. But his body wouldn't move. Every survival instinct he had, and Bakugo had excellent instincts, was screaming predator. "Oh! It's you!" Ochako Uraraka appeared at the door, beaming. She spotted Izuku and rushed over. "The plain-looking boy. Or, well, you look different now. But it's you! The one who exploded the giant robot." Izuku looked up. The terrifying aura receded instantly, replaced by a polite, distant mask. "Hello? You are the girl with the gravity manipulation. I'm Uraraka Ochako. Thanks for saving me. I tried to give you some of my points, but they said you didn't need them because you got, like, infinity points." "That's crazy. It was adequate," Izuku said. "If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave." The voice came from the floor. A man in a yellow sleeping bag lay there like a discarded caterpillar. Aizawa Shota. He unzipped the bag and stood up, looking disheveled and exhausted. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Put these on and meet me on the field." He held up a blue gym uniform. "We're doing a Quirk apprehension test." "A test?" The class chorused. "What about the ceremony?" "The guidance counselor? If you want to be heroes, you don't have time for leisurely events," Aizawa deadpanned. "UA is about freedom. And that includes the freedom to cut the chase." He glanced at Izuku. Especially when we have anomalies to assess. The Quirk apprehension test. The P grounds were vast, open, and filled with dust. The class gathered, shivering slightly in their gym uniforms. Izuku stood off to the side, his arms crossed. He wore the tracksuit, but he had kept his ornamental metal collar around his neck. Aizawa hadn't argued. Bakugo, Aizawa said. You finished first in the entrance exam. Well, technically second in points, but first in combat. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He smirked, glancing back at Izuku. Watch this, Deku. Die. Bakugo hurled the ball, adding a massive explosion at the point of release. The ball rocketed into the sky. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his device. The class gasped. Awesome! We can use our quirks as much as we want? This looks like fun! Aizawa's expression darkened. Fun? You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's all going to be fun? Right. Let's make this interesting. The student who ranks last in total potential will be judged as having 0 potential and will be expelled immediately. Expelled? Uraraka cried. That's not fair. It's the first day. Natural disasters aren't fair, Aizawa retorted. Villains aren't fair. If you want fair, go to a normal high school. He looked directly at Izuku. Midoriya. You're up. Izuku stepped forward. The class went silent. They all remembered the 0-pointer. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida Tenya revved his engines. I shall do my best. Izuku stood in the lane next to him. He didn't get into a runner's crouch. He simply hovered an inch off the ground. Start! The robot shouted. Ida blasted forward. Whoosh! He crossed the line in 3.04 seconds. Izuku didn't appear to move. One moment he was at the start line, the next, he was standing past the finish line, checking his fingernails. 0.02 seconds, the robot announced. What? Kaminari screamed. Is that teleportation? No, Yaoyorozen narrowed her eyes. He moved. He just moved faster than the shutter speed of the human eye. He displaced the air so cleanly there wasn't even a sonic boom. That requires impossible control. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. He squeezed. Crack. The device exploded into plastic shrapnel and dust. Error, the machine beeped. Oops, Izuku said, devoid of apology. It was fragile. Shoji, who had just scored 540 kilograms, looked at his own multiple hands and felt very inadequate. Test 3, standing long jump. Izuku jumped. He didn't come down. He floated in the air for a moment, looked at the sand pit, realized the point was to land, and slowly descended past the sandbox completely. Cleared, Aizawa muttered. Test 4, repeated side steps. Mineta was bouncing back and forth rapidly. Izuku simply created 2 afterimages of himself that stood on either side of the line. It looked like there were 3 of him. This guy is a monster, Kirishima whispered to Shiro. Is he even human? The main event, ball throw. It was finally time. Izuku stepped into the circle. Aizawa handed him the ball. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice low. I watched the footage. That power of yours, it's dangerous. It's not just strength. It's destruction. Izuku held the ball. And if you can't control it, you're a liability. I expelled an entire class last year. Don't think you're special just because you have power, Izuku chuckled. It was a dry, hollow sound. You worry about control, Aizawa-sensei. You think I am a cannon that fires blindly. Izuku tossed the ball up and caught it. I am not the cannon. I am the ammunition. He wound up his arm. He didn't use the flashy purple Hawkeye energy this time. He simply used physical strength augmented by God Ki. He threw. Boom. The sound barrier shattered instantly. A shockwave erupted from the circle, knocking the other students off their feet. The wind pressure blew the leaves off the trees nearby. The ball ignited from air friction, turning into a streak of plasma as it tore through the atmosphere. Aizawa stared at his device. The numbers were climbing rapidly. They didn't stop. Beep. Aizawa turned the screen to the class. It didn't show a number. It showed the symbol for infinity symbol. It escaped the gravitational pull of the planet, Aizawa said, his hair standing on end. It's in orbit. The class was paralyzed. Bakugo was shaking, not with rage, but with something closer to existential dread. However, Aizawa said. His hair floated up. His eyes glowed red. He activated his quirk, erasure. He looked at Izuku. That power, it makes you arrogant. Aizawa tried to cut off the flow of Izuku's power. He reached out with his sensory quirk to latch onto the quirk factor within Izuku. He found nothing. It was like trying to grab smoke. There was no genetic switch to flip. No biological mechanism to suppress. Izuku's power wasn't a mutation. It was a fundamental aspect of his being. Izuku turned to Aizawa. He felt the attempt. That is annoying, Izuku said. In a blur of motion, Izuku was in front of Aizawa. What? Aizawa started. Izuku reached out and grabbed Aizawa's capture scarf. He pulled the teacher down to eye level. Aizawa's red eyes met Izuku's purple ones. You are trying to erase a quirk, Izuku whispered. The pressure around them spiked, cracking the concrete beneath their feet. But I told you, Sensei. I am quirkless. You cannot erase a law of nature. You can try to stop a tsunami with a gaze, but you will only get wet. Aizawa froze. For the first time in his career, he felt completely helpless. His erasure was useless. Let him go, Midoriya. All Might's voice rang out from the tunnel entrance, but he was too far away to intervene. Suddenly, a staff tapped Izuku's shoulder. Clack. The pressure vanished instantly. The red hue of the killing intent dissipated. Whis stood there, smiling pleasantly. Now, Lord Izuku, Whis chided gently. We do not threaten the teaching staff. It's bad form. And you're scaring the children. Izuku released the scarf. He stepped back, straightening his tie. He attempted to suppress me, Whis. I was merely educating him on the futility, and a fine lesson it was, Whis agreed. He turned to Aizawa, who was gasping for breath. My apologies, Mr. Aizawa. My student can be a bit absolute. Whis reached into his robes and pulled out two heavy, metallic wristbands. They were black with gold runes etched into them. Izuku, give me your wrists. Izuku sighed but complied. Whis snapped the bands onto Izuku's wrists. Click. Click. Immediately Izuku's posture slumped slightly. The terrified feeling in the air vanished. He looked smaller. Still strong, but mortal. These are sealing shackles, Whis explained to the stunned class and teacher. They restrict 99.9% of his divine energy. He is now capped at roughly the level of, let's say, a top-tier pro hero. This should prevent him from accidentally sneezing and vaporizing the gymnasium. Whis patted Izuku on the head. Play nice. I'll be in the cafeteria sampling the mochi. Whis vanished in a blur of speed. Silence reigned on the field. Aizawa rubbed his neck, staring at Izuku with a mix of wariness and calculation. You're a monster. Izuku looked at his shackled wrists. He clenched his fist. It felt heavy, weak. He felt like he was moving through molasses. I am a necessary evil, Izuku corrected. He looked at the scoreboard. He was in first place by a landslide. Did I pass, Sensei? Aizawa gritted his teeth. Go back to class. All of you. Nobody is getting expelled today. He glared at Izuku. But you, Midoriya, you're on thin ice. If you threaten a student or teacher again, I don't care what you are. I'll find a way to stop you. Izuku walked past him. Good luck with that. The aftermath in the locker room. The boys changed in silence. Usually, this was a time for chatter, bragging, and comparing bodies. But today, the air was tense. Izuku took off his shirt. Mineta gasped. Whoa! Izuku's back was a roadmap of scars. Not the surgical scars of a hospital, but the jagged, rough scars of cosmic training. Burns from plasma, lacerations from gravity shears, bruises that looked like galaxies. Kirishima, the resident manly man, couldn't help himself. Dude! What kind of training did you do? That looks intense. Izuku pulled on his uniform shirt, buttoning it calmly. I carried the weight of the world. Literally. Bakugo stood by his locker, slamming it shut. He didn't look at Izuku. He was trembling with humiliation. He had lost. He had lost completely. And worse, Deku hadn't even looked at him. He thinks I'm an ant, Bakugo realized. He doesn't hate me. He just doesn't care. Izuku tied his tie and looked in the mirror. His eyes flashed purple for a second, even with the shackles. He had passed the first test. He had established his hierarchy, but as he looked at his classmates, Kirishima laughing with Siro, Ida scolding Mineta, he felt a strange pang in his chest. A memory of a feeling he used to have, loneliness. Being a god was powerful. But as Whis had warned him, the view from the top was very, very empty. Izuku shook his head, clearing the thought. He had a job to do. He walked out of the locker room, leaving the mortals behind. The uniform of the mortal, the UA high school uniform, was tailored to perfection. It was a slate-gray blazer with dark green accents, trousers that held a sharp crease, and a red tie that required a knot Izuku hadn't tied in centuries. In the mirror of his bedroom, Izuku Midoriya adjusted the collar. It felt stifling. For the better part of 300 years, subjective time in the Destroyer's dimension, he had worn the loose, flowing silks of a deity in training. He was accustomed to the weight of the golden sash and the ornamental gorget that signified his station. This polyester blend felt like wrapping oneself in plastic wrap. It limits your range of motion, a voice chimed from the window. Izuku didn't turn. He watched the reflection of Whis, who was hovering cross-legged outside the second-story window, peeling a banana with telekinesis. It is a uniform, Whis. Its purpose is conformity, not utility, Izuku replied, his voice a low, smooth baritone that seemed too old for his teenage reflection. I am to blend in. Blend in? Whis chuckled, tossing the banana peel into a pocket dimension. Izuku, you radiate the presence of a collapsing star. You could wear a cardboard box and people would still feel the need to bow, but do try. Remember the mission, assessment, observation, judgment. Izuku sighed, finally managing a passable knot in the tie. He picked up the yellow backpack his mother had bought him. It was light, empty of books, filled only with a bento box that Whis had undoubtedly tampered with to improve the seasoning. I remember, Izuku said. I am to determine if this society of heroes is a structure worth maintaining, or if it is a termite-ridden house that needs to be burned down. He walked to the door, pausing to look at the All Might poster that still hung, peeling slightly, on his wall. The hero's smile was wide, confident, and utterly oblivious to the cosmic scales balancing above his head. Let's hope they don't bore me, Izuku whispered. Class 1A. The Silence of the Lambs. The corridors of UA were vast, designed to accommodate students with gigantification quirks or mutation types. To the average student, they were halls of opportunity. To Izuku, they were merely inefficient use of space. He arrived at the massive door labeled 1A. Inside, the noise was already reaching a crescendo. A boy with engines in his calves was aggressively chopping the air, lecturing another boy with spiky ash-blonde hair about the sanctity of school property. Remove your foot from the desk. Tenya Ida commanded, his glasses flashing. Do you not think it disrespectful to the upperclassmen who sat there before you? Katsuki Bakugo sneered, his red eyes narrowing. Ha! Disrespectful? What junior high are you from, you uptight elite? I am from semi-private academy. My name is Ida Tenya. Semi? So you're a damn elite. Bakugo barked, small explosions popping in his palms. I'll have fun crushing you. Crushing? That's cruel. Do you truly aim to be a hero? The dynamic was chaotic. It was loud. It was brimming with the raw, uncontrolled hormonal energy of adolescence. Then, the door slid open. Izuku stepped in. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He didn't even release his aura intentionally. But the moment his foot touched the linoleum of the classroom, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if someone had sucked the oxygen out of the room and replaced it with heavy water. The chatter died instantly. Ida froze mid-chop. The invisible girl, Hagakure, stopped vibrating. Even Bakugo, whose back was to the door, stiffened as if an ice cube had been dropped down his shirt. Izuku walked into the room. His steps were silent. He carried himself with a posture that wasn't just straight, it was regal. He moved like a predator that had already eaten and was simply passing through the herd. He walked past Ida, who instinctively stepped back to clear a path. He walked past Uraraka, who squeaked a greeting that died in her throat. He stopped at the desk directly behind Bakugo. "Katsuki," Izuku said. Bakugo turned slowly. His face was a mask of conflict, rage warring with a deep, primal recognition of threat. He remembered the entrance exam. He remembered the zero-pointer turning to dust. "Deku," Bakugo ground out. You actually came." "I was invited," Izuku replied, placing his bag on the hook. He sat down, folding his hands on the desk. "And please lower your voice. Your insecurity is loud enough without the shouting." Bakugo's eye twitched. "What did you say, you quirkless? If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave." The voice came from the floor. The students jumped, turning to the doorway where a yellow sleeping bag lay like a chrysalis. Aizawa Shoda unzipped himself, revealing a disheveled man with bloodshot eyes and a stubble that spoke of sleepless nights. "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down," Aizawa muttered, standing up and shedding the sleeping bag. "Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on Izuku. Izuku met the gaze calmly. There was no fear in the boy's purple eyes, only a mild curiosity. This is the anomaly, Aizawa thought. The walking void. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoda," he introduced himself dryly. "Put these on and meet me on the grounds." He pulled a blue gym uniform out of his bag and tossed it onto the podium. "We're doing a Quirk apprehension test." "A test?" Uraraka cried out. "But what about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting?" Aizawa began to walk away. "If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes." He paused at the door. "You kids have been doing these tests since junior high, right? Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from students without quirks. It's not rational. But here," he glanced back, "here, you will use everything you have." The grounds, physics versus metaphysics. The spring air was crisp. The students gathered on the dirt field, changing into their blue tracksuits. Izuku wore his, though he kept the metallic collar Whis had given him around his neck, a fashion choice Aizawa had decided not to challenge yet. "Bakugo," Aizawa called out. "You finished first in the entrance exam combat points. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. "Try doing it with your quirk." Bakugo stepped into the circle. He grinned, a savage expression returning to his face. This was his territory. Physical dominance. "You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle," Aizawa instructed. Bakugo wound up. He channeled his explosive sweat into his palm. "I'll show them. I'll show that nerd." Die! Boom! The explosion was massive, sending a shockwave through the group. The ball rocketed into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his tablet. "Whoa!" Kaminari cheered. "Over 700 meters? That's insane! This looks like fun!" Ashido clapped. "We can use our quirks as much as we want." Aizawa's expression darkened. The air around him grew heavy, though not as heavy as the pressure Izuku emitted. "Fun, huh?" Aizawa whispered. "You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that during a crisis?" He grinned, a terrifying expression. "All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion." "Expulsion?" The class erupted in protest. "That's not fair!" Uraraka shouted. "It's the first day. Natural disasters aren't fair," Aizawa retorted. "Power-hungry villains aren't fair. Catastrophic accidents aren't fair. Heroes are the ones who correct those unfairness. If you wanted to hang out at a burger joint after school, you're in the wrong place." He looked directly at Izuku. "Welcome to the Department of Heroics." Izuku stood near the back, watching the display with a bored expression. Fear as a motivator, Izuku mused. Crude. Effective for mortals, perhaps, but it breeds anxiety, not loyalty. "Midoriya," Aizawa said sharply. "You don't look worried." "Should I be?" Izuku asked. "If I am the weakest here, then I deserve to be expelled." That is natural selection. It is fair. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. We'll see. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida Tenya was vibrating with readiness. I shall do my best. He lined up against Azuritsuyu. The gun fired. Ida's engines roared, propelling him across the finish line in 3.04 seconds. Impressive, Izuku noted quietly. Then it was Izuku's turn. He was paired with Bakugo. Bakugo crouched low, his hands popping with small explosions. I'm gonna leave you in the dust, Deku. Don't think your magic trick with the robot scares me. Izuku stood straight. He didn't crouch. He kept his hands in his pockets. Readied. Go! Bakugo blasted off, using explosions behind him to propel himself. Izuku simply stepped forward. To the naked eye, it looked like he vanished. There was no sound of feet hitting the dirt. There was no sonic boom, which was physically confusing given the speed. He simply displaced himself from point A to point B. Before Bakugo was halfway down the track, Izuku was standing past the finish line, brushing a speck of dust from his shoulder. 0.02 seconds, the robotic voice announced. The machine smoked slightly. Bakugo skidded to a halt, staring at Izuku's back. What? Aizawa stared at the stopwatch. He didn't use a speed enhancement quirk. He didn't use propulsion. He just moved. The sheer muscular output required to move that fast without tearing his own legs off is theoretical. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the handheld device. He looked at it. Grip it as hard as you can, Aizawa said. Izuku squeezed. He didn't mean to destroy it. He really didn't. But his control over his own physical strength was still calibrated to the gravity of the destroyer's planet, 30 times that of Earth. Crunch. The device didn't just break. It compressed into a dense ball of metal and plastic, sparking as the battery was crushed into plasma. Oops, Izuku said flatly. Do you have a more durable one? Mizo Shoji, who had just scored 540 kilograms, looked at his multiple arms and then at the crushed lump in Izuku's hand. He quietly stepped back. Test 3, standing long jump. Izuku jumped. He realized midair that he had applied too much force. He cleared the sandbox. He cleared the fence. He cleared the tree line behind the school. He floated back down a minute later, landing softly. Cleared. Aizawa marked his sheet, his pen digging into the paper. Test 4, repeated side steps. Mineta was bouncing rapidly, using his balls. Izuku moved side to side so fast that he created afterimages. It looked like a solid wall of green and gray. The wind generated from his movement began to create a small cyclone, blowing dirt into the eyes of his classmates. Stop, Aizawa ordered. Izuku stopped instantly. The wind died. This guy. Shiro whispered to Kirishima. Is he a robot? An alien? He's manly, Kirishima gulped. Terrifying, but manly. Shoto Todoroki watched from the side. His heterochromatic eyes were fixed on Izuku. He's not using a quirk. There's no emission of ice or fire. No transformation. It's just raw, physical superiority. Is he like All Might? The ball throw, infinity and beyond. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the field. The class had completed most of the tests. Uraraka had gotten infinity on her ball throw, cheering excitedly. Midoriya, Aizawa called. You're last. Izuku stepped into the circle. He picked up the softball. It felt light, like a hollow eggshell. Aizawa stepped forward. This was the moment. He had read the file. Quirkless. Then updated to unknown energy source. Midoriya, Aizawa spoke, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I watched the entrance exam footage. You destroyed that robot with a gesture. You erased it. Izuku looked at the ball. It was in the way. That power, Aizawa continued, his scarf beginning to float, his hair rising. It's not a tool for saving people. It's a tool for annihilation. If you can't control the output, you'll kill someone. A hostage, a bystander, a teammate. Izuku turned his head. And your point, sensei? My point is, Aizawa's eyes glowed bright red, you are a liability. Erasure. Aizawa activated his quirk. He locked onto Izuku, reaching out with his consciousness to snag the quirk factor, the genetic switch that allowed superhumanity. He clamped down on it, intending to shut off Izuku's power completely. Nothing happened. Usually, when Aizawa raced a quirk, he felt a resistance, a snag, followed by the sensation of closing a valve. With Izuku, he was grasping at the void. There was no valve. There was no switch. There was no genetic mutation to suppress. Are your eyes dry? Izuku asked. Aizawa flinched. What? You are trying to turn off my power, Izuku said, turning his body fully toward the teacher. The air began to vibrate. Pebbles on the ground started to float. But you are making a category error, Aizawa Shota. Izuku took a step forward. A quirk is a biological function. It is an addition to a human. Like an extra limb. Izuku's eyes began to glow. Not with the red of a quirk, but with a deep, cosmic violet. I am not adding power to this body, Izuku whispered, and his voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. I am the power. You cannot erase gravity. You cannot erase entropy. You cannot erase me. Aizawa felt a spike of genuine fear. His hair was still standing up, his eyes still red, but it wasn't working. The pressure radiating from the boy was increasing. The ground beneath Izuku's feet began to crack, turning into dust. You speak of control, Izuku said, raising the ball. You think I am a loose cannon. You think I am reckless. He didn't wind up. He didn't use a pitching stance. He simply held the ball out in front of him. He flicked his wrist. Crack boom. It sounded like a thunderclap occurring inside their eardrums. The air displaced by the ball created a shockwave that knocked Mineta and Aoyama off their feet. Aizawa had to brace himself against the wind. The ball vanished. It didn't arc. It didn't drop. It simply left the atmosphere, igniting into a streak of purple plasma as it exited the planet's gravitational pull. Aizawa's tablet beeped. He turned the screen around. Infinity. Infinity, Aizawa read, his voice hoarse. Without using a quirk. Efficiency, Izuku corrected. Now, are we done? I believe I have passed your arbitrary threshold. Aizawa gritted his teeth. He felt powerless. He was the teacher. He was the pro-hero. He was the one who could stop anyone. But he couldn't stop this. He grabbed his capture scarf. It was an irrational move, driven by the need to assert dominance, to prove that this student was still a student. Don't get cocky. Aizawa snapped, launching the carbon fiber ribbons. They wrapped around Izuku's torso and arms. I can't erase your power, Aizawa growled, pulling Izuku closer. But I can restrain your body. You rely on brute force. In my class that won't. Izuku didn't struggle. He simply looked at the scarf. Decay. The gray fibers of the capture weapon turned black. Then they turned to ash. They crumbled away from Izuku's body like burnt paper. Aizawa stumbled back, holding the severed ends of his weapon. My scarf. Everything has a lifespan, Izuku said coldly. Even your tools. Do not bind me again. The class was silent. Utterly, terrifiedly silent. They were watching a student threaten a teacher, destroy a weapon, and showcase power that defied logic. This is bad, Yayorozu whispered, her hands trembling. He's hostile. Bakugo stared, his mouth slightly open. He destroyed the scarf. Just by touching it? Just as the tension reached a breaking point, just as Aizawa reached for his knife, a sound cut through the heavy air. Tap. 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 Oh my. A figure descended from the sky. It was a man. An alien? He had pale blue skin, white hair, and robes that defied earthly fashion. He held a staff. Whis. Izuku sighed, the glowing purple in his eyes fading slightly. I was handling it. You were threatening a public servant, Izuku, Whis said, landing softly between the student and the teacher. And you destroyed his scarf. That's coming out of your allowance. Whis turned to Aizawa. Greetings. I am Whis. Izuku's, let's say, guardian. Aizawa stared at the being. He couldn't sense a quirk from him either. But his instincts were screaming even louder than they were with Izuku. This is the source. Guardian? Aizawa rasped. Your ward just destroyed school property and threatened a teacher. He has a temper, Whis admitted cheerfully. We're working on it. But Mr. Aizawa, you were attempting to suppress a force of nature. It's like trying to cap a volcano with a cork. It tends to end poorly for the cork. Whis reached into his robe. However, Yui is a place of learning, and Izuku does need to learn constraint. Since he seems unwilling to lower his output voluntarily, Whis pulled out 2 heavy, metallic bands. They were dark, etched with runes that seemed to shift if you looked at them too long. Izuku. Wrists. Izuku rolled his eyes. Is this necessary? I barely used 1%. And you vaporized a capture weapon, Whis noted. Wrists. Izuku extended his arms. Whis snapped the bands onto his wrists. Clank. Clank. The moment the bands locked, a visible ripple went through Izuku's body. He sagged slightly. The terrifying, crushing pressure that had filled the field vanished instantly. The air became light again. The birds started singing. Izuku looked at his hands. He clenched his fists. Heavy, Izuku muttered. And muffled. These act as a spiritual dampener, Whis explained to the class, who were watching with wide eyes. They restrict his destruction energy by roughly 99%. In this state, he is merely, physically comparable to your All Might, I suppose? But without the ability to erase matter from existence. Whis smiled at Aizawa. Will this suffice for safety regulations? Aizawa looked at the broken scarf, then at the shackled boy. He realized he was out of his depth. This wasn't a Quirk prodigy. This was a cosmic event wearing a high school uniform. If he steps out of line, Aizawa said, his voice steadying, I will expel him. God or not, Whis beamed. I would expect nothing less. Discipline him as you see fit. Just, don't try to erase him. It gives him a headache. Whis tapped his staff and vanished in a blur of light. The walk back, the monster in 1A. The walk back to the locker rooms was quiet. Usually, after the Quirk test, the students would be buzzing. They would be comparing scores, complaining about soreness, introducing themselves. Today, they walked in a loose formation, with a 5-foot radius of empty space around Izuku. Izuku walked alone. He could feel the weight of the shackles on his wrists. They were annoying. They felt like wearing wet mittens. He tried to summon his ki, the purple flame. It sparked, sputtered, and died. Effective, he thought. Whis doesn't cut corners. Hey! Izuku stopped. He didn't turn around. He knew the footsteps. Bakugo walked up to him. The explosive boy looked different. Less angry. More rattled. What the hell are you? Bakugo asked. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a genuine question. You're not Deku. Deku is a quirkless loser who cries when he scrapes his knee. You looked at Aizawa like he was an insect. Izuku turned. He looked at Bakugo's hands, which were clenched at his sides. I am what the universe needed me to be, Katsuki, Izuku said softly. I am the result of being told no by the world, and yes by something much older. Did you get a quirk from that blue guy? Bakugo demanded. Is that it? You sold your soul? Izuku laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I didn't sell anything. I simply accepted a job offer. He stepped closer to Bakugo. For once, Bakugo flinched back. You want to be the #1 hero, don't you? Izuku asked. You want to win. To be the strongest. I will be the strongest, Bakugo snarled, though it lacked his usual conviction. Good, Izuku said. Then work hard. Climb the mountain. Surpass All Might. Izuku leaned in, his shackled hands hanging by his sides. But remember, Katsuki. No matter how high you climb, I am the sky. You cannot punch the sky. Izuku turned and walked away, heading into the locker room. Midoriya. This time it was Uraraka. She had been walking with Ida, but she ran up to him. She looked scared, but her determination was stronger. Yes? Izuku asked. Are you okay? She asked. Izuku blinked. Okay, the teacher. He was really scary. And those handcuffs look heavy. And you seem really lonely. Izuku stared at her. He scanned her face for deceit. He found none. Just round, brown eyes filled with concern for a boy who could vaporize her in a nanosecond. Empathy, Izuku identified. A rare trait. I am fine, Uraraka, Izuku said, his tone softening just a fraction. The shackles are manageable. We're going to grab a drink at the vending machines, she offered, pointing to Ida. Do you want to come? Izuku looked at the vending machine. He looked at the group of students who were eyeing him warily. Logic dictated he decline. He was a god. They were mortals. Attachments were distractions, but his stomach growled. Does the machine have apple juice? Izuku asked. Uraraka beamed. Yeah. The best kind. Izuku adjusted his cuffs. Then I suppose I have time. As he walked with them, listening to Ida lecture him about the dress code violation of the metal collar, Izuku felt a strange sensation. It wasn't power. It wasn't destruction. It was quiet. For the first time in centuries, the roaring void in his chest felt just a little bit quieter. The scoreboard. Later, Aizawa posted the results. 1. Izuku Midoriya, infinity/immeasurable. 2. Momo Yaoyorozu. 3. Shoto Todoroki. 4. Katsuki Bakugo. 20. Izuku Midoriya. Wait, Aizawa had moved him to the bottom manually? By the way, Aizawa said, looking at the class. I lied about the expulsion. It was a logical ruse to draw out your upper limits. Way out? The class screamed. I knew it! Yaoyorozu sighed in relief. It was obviously a pedagogical technique. Izuku looked at Aizawa. Aizawa looked back. Liar, Izuku thought. You were going to expel the last place. You just didn't want the paperwork of expelling a god. Aizawa smirked, just barely. Izuku smirked back. Game on, sensei. The chariot of the mortals. The bus ride to the unforeseen simulation joint, USJ, was a study in claustrophobia. For being accustomed to the infinite expanse of a pocket dimension where gravity crushed mountains into diamonds, sitting knee to knee with a teenager who shot lasers from his navel was a distinct downgrade. Izuku Midoriya sat near the back, his posture perfectly upright. He gazed out the window, watching the cityscape of Muzdalifa blur into the greenery of the outskirts. The weighted shackles on his wrists, heavy, runic bands of dark metal, hummed softly against his skin. They were uncomfortable, acting as a spiritual dampener that made his very soul feel like it was wading through molasses. Midoriya-chan? Izuku turned his head slowly. Tsuyu Ajiri, the frog girl, was staring at him with unblinking, inquisitive eyes. Yes, Ajiri? Call me Tsuyu, she corrected. I say whatever comes to my mind. Your power, it's weird. The bus went quiet. The class had been tentatively gossiping about quirks, but when the topic shifted to the class enigma, ears perked up. Even Bakugo, sitting a few rows ahead, stopped scowling at the floor to listen. Weird? Izuku repeated, his voice smooth and neutral. Yeah, Tsuyu continued, tapping her chin. Usually, strong quirks are flashy. Like Bakugo's explosions or Todoroki's ice. But you didn't really do anything during the tests. You just commanded things to stop existing. And during the ball throw, it felt like the air was going to crush us. It reminds me less of a hero and more like a natural disaster. That's rude, Ajiri. Kirishima interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. But kinda manly too. It's super intense. Izuku looked at his shackled hands. A natural disaster is a part of the ecosystem, Tsuyu. It clears away the old to make way for the new. Perhaps that is the most accurate description. But what is it? Kaminari asked, leaning over the seat. Is it gravity? Telekinesis? Matter manipulation? It is authority, Izuku said simply. The answer was so vague and yet so final that Kaminari sat back down, confused. Authority? Aizawa's voice drifted from the front seat. Enough chatter. We're here. The bus hissed to a halt. The Temple of Catastrophe. The USJ was impressive, Izuku had to admit. As they stepped inside the massive dome, he looked up at the intricate framework of lights and walkways. It was a controlled environment designed to simulate chaos. Standing at the bottom of the long staircase was the space hero, 13. Welcome, everyone. 13's voice boomed through her suit. Before we begin, I have 1 or 2, or 3, or 4 points to make. As 13 launched into a passionate speech about the lethality of quirks and the fragility of life, Izuku listened with genuine interest. Black hole, Izuku mused, analyzing the hero. She wields a power of consumption. Primitive compared to Hakai, but conceptually similar. She understands that power is not just for punching, It is for removing obstacles. Quirks are not just tools for glory, 13 said, her voice serious. They can kill easily. In this class, you will learn how to use them to save. Save, Izuku whispered to himself. Or spare. Suddenly, the lights in the massive facility flickered. A low, electric hum vibrated through the floor. The fountain in the center of the central plaza sputtered and died. Aizawa spun around. Stay back. Down in the plaza, space began to warp. A swirl of black and purple mist expanded, tearing a hole in reality. It wasn't the clean, precise transport of Whis' staff. This was ragged, violent, and smelled of rot. A hand reached out of the mist. Pale, dead skin, then another. Dozens of figures began to pour out of the portal. Thugs with mutations, villains with crude weapons, and in the center, a man covered in severed hands. 13. Protect the students. Aizawa pulled his goggles down. This is real. Those are villains. Panic erupted among the students. Villains? Mineta shrieked. How did they get in? What about the censors? They have infiltrated a stronghold of heroes, Izuku observed, his voice cutting through the panic. He walked to the edge of the stairs, looking down. How ambitious. Midoriya, get back! Ida shouted. Sensei said to retreat. Retreat? Izuku looked at the villains swarming below. He squinted. Level 1 threats. Street brawlers. There is no strategy here. Just a mob. Eraserhead and 13, the hand-covered man, Shigaraki, rasped from the plaza, his voice carrying an eerie weight. The teacher's schedule we received said All Might was supposed to be here. Where is he? Shigaraki scratched his neck violently. I went through so much trouble to bring this crowd. I want to kill the symbol of peace. Kill All Might? Uraraka gasped. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He felt a signature. Not from the handman, but from the hulking, bird-brained beast standing silently next to him. It felt wrong. It felt like a soul that had been shattered and glued back together with malice. Sensei, Izuku called out. Aizawa stopped mid-leap. Midoriya, I told you to run. The big one, Izuku pointed. Do not engage it physically. It is not alive in the way you understand. Aizawa gritted his teeth. I can't pick my opponents. 13, get them out. Aizawa leaped into the fray, his capture scarf flying. The separation. The students ran for the exit, but the purple mist materialized in front of them. It coalesced into a humanoid shape with glowing yellow eyes, Kurogiri. I am afraid I cannot allow that, the mist spoke politely. We are the League of Villains. We have come to extinguish the light of All Might. Bakugo and Kirishima lunged. Bet you didn't count on us. They unleashed explosions and hardened punches, but the attacks passed harmlessly through the mist. It is useless, Kurogiri said. Now scatter. The mist expanded, enveloping the class. Izuku stood still. He saw the warp gate surrounding him. He could have stopped it. He could have flared his ki and disrupted the spatial coordinates. But curiosity got the better of him. Let us see where the trash is taken, he thought. The world twisted. Gravity inverted. Zone of the deluge. Izuku materialized in midair. Below him was water, the shipwreck zone. Screams echoed around him as Mineta and Tsuyu fell toward the artificial lake. Izuku didn't fall. He simply stopped falling. He hovered 10 feet above the water's surface, his arms crossed. Midoriya! Tsuyu yelled, splashing into the water. She grabbed Mineta and swam to the surface. We're surrounded. Indeed, the water was teeming with aquatic villains. Sharkmen, squid mutants, and divers with harpoon guns. They circled the students like piranhas. Jackpot! One villain with gills cheered. Kids! Easy pickings! They lunged toward Tsuyu. Boring Izuku's side, he descended slowly, his shoes hovering an inch above the rippling water. Stay behind me, Azuri, Izuku ordered. Ribbit? But you can't fight in the water. I don't intend to swim. The villain closest to him, a man with jaws like a trap, leaped out of the water. Die, hero! Izuku looked at him. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't fire a blast. He simply directed his intent at the villain. Kneel. A pulse of purple pressure radiated from Izuku. It wasn't physical. It was psychological dominance amplified by divine ki. The villain's eyes rolled back in his head. He frothed at the mouth and collapsed back into the water, unconscious before he hit the surface. The other villains froze. What did he do? He didn't even touch him. Izuku walked forward. With every step, the water repelled away from his feet, creating a dry path. I am currently judging the worth of your existence, Izuku announced, his voice echoing off the dome walls. So far I am unimpressed. You attack children to get to a celebrity? It lacks dignity. Get him! A group of 10 villains shouted, rushing him from all sides. Izuku yawned. He flicked his right hand to the side. The air pressure generated by the flick hit the water like a cannonball. A massive wave, 30 feet high, erupted, catching the villains and smashing them against the shipwreck. Bones broke. Weapons shattered. Silence fell over the shipwreck zone. Mineta was shaking, clinging to Tsuyu. He's terrifying. Is that everyone? Izuku asked, looking around. A trembling villain popped up from the water, holding a white flag. I surrender! I surrender! Izuku nodded. Wise. He turned to Tsuyu. The teacher is losing. We should return to the plaza. Aizawa-sensei is losing? Tsuyu asked, fear in her voice. He fights well, Izuku admitted, floating up to get a better vantage point. But numbers are irrelevant against quality. And that beast, it is of high quality. The plaza, the erasure of hope. By the time Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta made it back to the shore of the central plaza, the battle was effectively over. Aizawa was a ruin. The gnome sat atop him, snapping his arm like a twig. The sound echoed sickeningly. Aizawa didn't scream, but his body convulsed. Shigaraki stood over them, laughing. You're so cool, Eraserhead. But you're not a heavy hitter. You erase quirks, but this gnome, this is pure physical power. You can't erase muscle. Izuku watched from the shadows of the disaster zone entrance. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. Anger? No. Disgust. It was the inefficiency of it. The brutality without purpose. Game over, Shigaraki sighed. All Might isn't coming. Maybe if we kill a few kids, he'll show up. Shigaraki turned toward the water where Tsuyu and Mineta were hiding. Smash, Shigaraki ordered. The gnome moved. It was faster than the eye could follow. In a heartbeat, it was in front of Tsuyu, its massive fist raised. Tsuyu froze. She couldn't move. Death was a shadow looming over her. Then, the doors burst open. I am here, All Might. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't the TV star. He was fury incarnate. He blitzed the villains, grabbing Aizawa and the students, moving them to safety in a blur of motion. It's okay now, All Might said, though he was breathing heavy. He glared at the gnome. What followed was a clash of titans. All Might versus gnome. Shockwaves shattered the windows of the USJ. The water in the lake boiled from the friction of their punches. Izuku watched, analyzing. All Might is weakening, Izuku noted. His flame is sputtering. The gnome has shock absorption. And regeneration. All Might is punching a sponge. You can't win, All Might. Shigaraki cackled. Gnome was made to kill you. He is the anti-symbol of peace. All Might was grappling with the beast. The gnome's fingers dug into All Might's weak point, his side wound. Steam hissed. Blood flowed. I will not yield. All Might roared, delivering a suplex that cracked the concrete floor. But the gnome stood up, its injuries healing instantly. The students watched in horror. Their god was bleeding. He's going to lose, Mineta whispered. We're all going to die. Shigaraki noticed the students huddled near the edge. He noticed Izuku standing slightly apart, his arms crossed, looking bored. You, Shigaraki pointed at Izuku. The calm one. I hate you. You think you're safe? Shigaraki lunged. He was fast, faster than the exhausted students could react to. He bypassed All Might, who was pinned by the gnome. Shigaraki's hand reached for Tsuyu's face again. I'll start by crumbling your friends. Tsuyu closed her eyes. Vroom. The sound was low, like a bass drop. Shigaraki's hand stopped. It was inches from Tsuyu's face. But it couldn't move forward. Standing between Shigaraki and Tsuyu was Izuku. He hadn't raised his hands. He was simply there. An invisible wall of purple energy, thin as glass but hard as diamond, stood between them. Shigaraki touched the barrier. Decay. Nothing happened. What? Shigaraki scratched his neck frantically. Why isn't it rotting? Why aren't you dying? Izuku looked down at the villain. His eyes were glowing a luminous violet. Your power is entropy, Izuku said, his voice echoing as if two people were speaking at once. You accelerate the breakdown of matter. It is a child's understanding of destruction. Shigaraki backed away, his instinct screaming. Noma! Kill him! Kill the brat! The Nomu abandoned all might and charged Izuku. It wound up a punch that could level a skyscraper. Midoriya! All Might screamed, trying to reach them. Run! Izuku didn't run. He didn't dodge. He raised one hand. His palm was open. The heavy metal shackle on his wrist clanked. The Nomu's fist collided with Izuku's palm. Boom! A shockwave ripped through the plaza, blowing the water out of the central fountain and knocking Shigaraki off his feet. When the dust cleared, the students gasped. Izuku was still standing. He hadn't moved an inch. The ground beneath his feet was untouched, while the concrete behind him was pulverized in a cone shape. He had caught the punch. The Nomu screeched, trying to pull its hand back. It couldn't. Izuku's grip was absolute. Biological modification, Izuku diagnosed, looking at the creature's exposed brain. Multiple DNA strands forced into a single vessel. It is in constant pain. It has no soul. It is merely a puppet. Izuku looked at Shigaraki. You created a thing that cannot die, simply to kill a man who saves lives. That is disorderly. Let go of him. Shigaraki shrieked. Nomu, regenerate. Crush him. The Nomu tried to swing its other fist. Izuku's eyes flared. Regenerate this. Izuku's hand began to glow with the dark, destructive energy of Hawkeye. But he didn't release it as a blast. He injected it. He channeled the energy directly into the Nomu's fist. The purple energy raced up the creature's arm like a virus. It didn't destroy the flesh. It destroyed the Quirk factors. The Nomu howled, a sound of true primal fear. I am not killing it, Izuku explained calmly, as the Nomu's muscles began to shrink. I am simply erasing the unnatural additions. The shock absorption. The super regeneration. The super strength. The purple light consumed the Nomu. Chunks of its artificial bulk flaked away like ash, revealing a smaller, withered, mindless creature underneath. It collapsed, twitching, unable to regenerate, unable to fight. It was no longer a monster. It was just a broken biological experiment. Izuku dropped the creature's limp hand. He wiped his own hand on his trousers. There, Izuku said. Now it is mortal. All Might can handle the rest. The stalemate. Silence. The entire USJ was frozen. All Might stared at Izuku. He had seen power before. He possessed the greatest power on Earth. But this was something else. Izuku hadn't overpowered the Nomu. He had undone it. Shigaraki was hyperventilating. He scratched his neck until it bled. Cheater, you're a cheater. You broke my toy. Who are you? You're not a hero. Heroes don't do that. Izuku walked toward Shigaraki. The villain scrambled back. I am the janitor, Izuku said coldly. And you have made a mess. Izuku raised his finger. A small bead of purple energy formed at the tip. Kurogyri. Shigaraki screamed. Get us out. Now. The mist wrapped around Shigaraki. I'm sorry, Shigaraki Tamura, Kurogyri said, his voice urgent. That boy, he is dangerous. We must leave. Wait, Izuku said. He flicked the bead of energy. It flew through the air, faster than a bullet. It missed Shigaraki, intentionally, and hit the warp gate itself. For a second, the purple mist of the warp gate sizzled and burned. Kurogyri screamed as part of his misty body was erased. The portal destabilized, flickering wildly. Remember this pain, Izuku said. Next time you interrupt my education, I will not miss. The portal collapsed, sucking Shigaraki and the injured Kurogyri away in a violent, unstable warp. They were gone. The aftermath, the adrenaline faded. The silence returned. Young Midoriya. All Might limped forward. He was steaming, his time limit nearly up. He reverted to his skeletal form in a puff of smoke, coughing blood. The students gathered around. Kirishima, Bakugo, and Todoroki arrived from their zones, having seen the finale. Deku, Bakugo whispered. He looked at the withered remains of the Noma. What did you do to it? I fixed it, Izuku said. He looked tired. Using that much precision with the shackles on was exhausting. It was like doing microsurgery while wearing boxing gloves. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The reinforcements were here. Izuku sat down on the edge of the broken fountain. He looked at his hands. Are you okay, Ribbit? Tsuyu sat next to him. She was trembling. I am fine, Izuku said. He looked at All Might, who was being supported by Kirishima. The symbol of peace looked at the god of destruction. All Might realized something in that moment. He had been worried that Izuku would be defenseless without a quirk. He had been wrong. Izuku wasn't defenseless. He was the defense. But looking at the cold, purple light fading from Izuku's eyes, All Might felt a new fear. Who will save the world from him? The detective's inquiry. Later, outside the USJ. The students were wrapped in blankets. Detective Tsukachi was taking statements. So, Tsukachi said, looking at his notepad, then at Izuku. You neutralized the bioweapon? Yes, Izuku said. He was drinking a juice box Uraraka had given him. How? Did you kill it? No. It is alive. It is simply empty now. I removed the quirks that were holding it together. Tsukachi paused. You removed quirks? Like All for One? No, Izuku said, crushing the juice box. It vanished into dust. All for One steals. I destroy. There is nothing left to steal. Tsukachi swallowed hard. Right. I'll put that in the report. Quirk, unknown destructive capability. As Izuku walked toward the bus, he felt a gaze on him. He looked up. Perched on a lamppost far away, barely visible, was a crow. But it had 3 eyes. Izuku stared at it. The crow burst into flames and turned to ash. Stop spying, Izuku whispered to the wind. Somewhere, in a dark room filled with monitors, All for One sat in his chair. The screen showing the USJ feed went black. The villain smiled beneath his mask. Interesting, All for One mused. A power that cannot be stolen. A power that rivals the gods. I must meet this boy. Back on the bus, the ride back was quieter. No one asked Izuku about his power this time. They knew. It wasn't a quirk. It was a verdict. Izuku closed his eyes. He could feel the universe humming. It was still out of balance. Shigaraki was chaos. All Might was order, but fading order. The scales are tipping, Izuku thought. He touched the metal band on his wrist. And I am the weight.